Hey, welcome to Motorbike Mondays, episode 4. This is Evan from Race Tech Electric.
Brady from Seaweed and Gravel.
And Jared from Seaweed and Gravel.
So, glad to have you guys sticking with us for what is 4 episodes now. We've gotten some good feedback already, so I guess we're doing something right. And this must be kind of interesting to listen to because people are actually sending us emails.
People care, man.
Yeah, cool. I know. It's a good feeling. We're going to be internet celebrities in no time. Maybe.
No.
If we stick with, you got to dream big. If you stick with it, maybe.
Within reason.
I'm down with dreaming big, dude. It's cool.
So let's go over some news first. We got featured on iTunes in the upcoming podcast section, which was awesome. I still don't really know what the requirements for that are, but
pretty much you just have to make something.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
I think you just have to have a podcast, but either way, that's kind of cool. It's been under the new and noteworthy section all week, so that was cool. We've gotten some reviews on there, which is good. Then we've also gotten some emails and contacts on the website, which is awesome. I guess let's start. We got an email from Thomas. So let's go over that real quick. He asked some questions. Thomas had let's see. Which bike is he talking about?
The
XS?
He's talking about
CB400F?
Yeah, the 75.
Oh, that's right. So he has a 75 CB400F. The bike got in a wreck, sounds like, and he's
also a fellow San Diegan.
Yeah, he is in San Diego somewhere. He said the bike was wrecked on the 805.
Yeah. Which
sucks. That's miserable traffic, so that's no good. So let's see. You said the alternator cover's cracked, and you got a pretty nasty oil leak, and it looks like it's not fixable. So his main question was he's trying to find parts for what is a not a super common bike, and he's just asking for tips trying to find an undamaged alternator cover. He was asking about getting a parts motor or tracking down that individual part. So we'll give him some feedback on that. I mean, my first thought really is eBay. That's the
first thing
quickest way to find that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's also, I think, too, how he might be searching for it. He might be throwing in, CB400F.
Yeah.
Which could throw you off. They're the F and I don't know if they're the K models.
Yeah.
But,
if you just search CB400, it's going to be the same model.
It's going to be the same.
Well, in different combinations of, CB400 with no spaces, and then CB space 400. Mm-hmm. Also, look up the OEM parts. You can find it on Bike Bandit or some other website.
On the Parts Fish.
Yeah, check the Parts Fish and see what the part number is, and then you can usually do a where used search to see where that part number was used. There's a place called Honda Parts House or something. There's a website for every manufacturer, something like Honda Parts House, Kawasaki Parts House. I know it has house in the title, but they have microfiche for every Japanese bike brand with original OEM part numbers, and they have a really good search. So once you find the part number for your particular year, you can put it into the where used search, and it'll tell you every microfiche that had that part number. So that's a really quick way to see if that alternator cover was used on any other year bike, so you can expand your search instead of just looking for 75. Other than that
could expand into other CB models as
well.
Yeah,
it could be the same cover that's on the 550 or something like that.
I mean,
I don't know that for sure, but it could very well be the same part that they used on different bikes that cross-references.
Yeah, so try that. Look on some forums, too. I mean,
the other option that, if it was a personal bike of mine, I would probably go this route.
Weld it?
Yeah. I mean, this all depends on how badly damaged it is, but if it just cracked, you can easily just, if you don't have accessibility to, say, aluminum weld, like a TIG welder that can weld aluminum, you can easily find some fab shop or welder that can do it for you easily and cheaply. And
it'll probably be
I think it's kind of cool. Yeah, it'll be, a fix however long it takes to get it over there and have them do it. To weld up a crack on a case would probably take like 10 minutes.
Yeah. Any fabrication shop should be able to do that.
Yeah, and usually stuff like that quick in and out, I mean, you're probably going to the guy's just going to say, hey, give me some beer money for tonight. 20, $50, whatever. But, and also that, like, if you'd like him to grind it down to smooth it all out too, I mean, I'm sure there'll be additional, or you can just do that yourself. But I'd leave the weld on there. I think it's kind of badass.
Yeah, it kind of looks
probably get it welded on the inside too.
I wouldn't do it on the inside just for clearances reasons.
Yeah.
Just stay away from JB Weld.
Yeah, don't JB Weld.
I've pulled so many cases and covers off that have JB Weld goobed in there, and it's just havoc.
Well, I mean, if it's a TIG weld, it's gonna really thin.
Yeah, it's gonna penetrate and seal up.
Yeah.
Well, if it's the alternator cover, definitely don't do it on the inside, because those probably have a ring stator, and you're gonna probably have clearance issues. Mm-hmm. So,
I would go that route if it's a personal bike. I wouldn't necessarily do that on a client bike, just because I wouldn't do that. But
find a new cover.
Yeah, I'd find a new cover, or actually, I mean, if it came down to it, I would weld it up and grind it smooth and make it look like. I mean, you can still polish it out. And, I mean, you can make it. You can get it done and still look good that way. But
another option that is not really like our first go-to, but it's, if you have it near you, it's worth doing. It's like a parts place, a motorcycle salvage yard.
Oh yeah.
I hate.
Well, I mean, so here's the thing: like, there's some salvage yards that are sweet, and there's some that are not, and
all of them.
It's Brady hates salvage yards.
No, I just don't like going into a place, wasting my damn time without a guarantee that I'm going to find this part, especially if you can't find it on the largest salvage yard, which is eBay.
Right. And so a lot of people on eBay are salvage people just across the United States. So, but I mean, if you have one down the street from you, it's worth it.
This guy's in San Diego. I would check out Stalkers. I've been there quite a bit. Although, speaking of shitty salvage yards, I would be careful, because I've gotten screwed multiple times at Stalkers. Whatever you do, it's kind of a trip if you don't live down south, because they're in like Chula Vista or something. And I have had a couple times there that I've called them ahead of time with really specific part for the specific year, make, and model that I need, and then they are quick to tell you on the phone that they have it, and then you go down there, and they'll either raise the price, or they will make you buy the entire assembly instead of the specific part you need, or they just plain don't have it. Like,
I feel like my point's been proven over and over already.
No, but I'm saying it's worth a shot if you can't find it anywhere else.
I've also been saved because of Stalkers, because they happen to have exactly what I need. So it's worth a shot, but don't call them. Go in there, take the cover with you so you can line it up and make sure it's the same one, and just, be careful.
So get it welded, I think, is what we established.
That's probably your best option, I think.
And bitches love stitches, so, I mean, you see some stitches on that case, and
do an eBay search, see what you can find. If not, fix it.
Yeah.
Let's see, we had a couple other comments on the website. We had a guy, I don't know how you say his name, Aris. He said, let's see, I'm in college and have a 72 CL 175. The tank is really rusted inside, needs new tires, burns a lot of oil. Thinking it's going to run $200 to $300 to fix, and I paid $700 for it. Not sure if it's worth the money, or I should just get a new bike. What are some models you guys recommend for running errands that are not too small? I've been looking at the CB350. Any other models? I wrote him back on the website and said the CL175 is fairly rare. I said CB model. That's wrong. But that's a fairly rare bike. It's going to be kind of difficult to find parts for. I have no clue on the interchangeability of that thing.
As far as they still repop like rings, and you can still find those. And then like gasket sets too. I'm sure you can find. I haven't specifically looked, but
yeah. But keep in mind the value of the bike, and he's looking at tires. The tank is going to have to be cleaned and then coated or replace.
Yeah, if you do coat, use red coat. Don't touch that poor 15 crap.
Yeah, and the red coat is nice because you can just
with
put the red coat, you just put it in, and it's a one-step thing versus
you want to, I mean, it can cover up rust and neutralize it, but you want to get it as clean as possible and get the rust out. Because, too, when you get the rust out of the tank, you're going to find possibly there are pinholes that just the inline coating can't, or a liner, tank liner won't be able to fill. I think like most of them can fill up to like a 32nd of an inch.
Yeah, and then you're going to be in for chasing pinhole leaks.
Yeah,
that's the worst.
And I've run through this where it's you to fill even just little pinholes on the tank. Welding it's the metal is so corroded and worn down that it's just paper thin metal at that point. And if you do get all the pinholes, it's just the structure of the tank is going to be diminished enough to where it's just going to.
Well, so if he wants to look at other bikes, I mean,
CB350 is good.
I said the 350. I've had a 360 twin that was an awesome little bike. For running errands, they're fine. They're not really freeway bikes at all.
I would look at older like enduro, like smaller enduro bikes too.
That'd be cool.
Are fun as hell.
Yeah,
you can pick them up pretty inexpensively, and they're built to be ridden hard, so they can take an abuse. And it's all really, I mean, trying to like narrow down like model specific or even type of bike is difficult. It all depends on your use you're going to be using it. If putting around town, definitely a smaller CC bike is going to be more than enough. But I check out some old like XR250s DRs.
Those are in the newer, late 80s, 90s. Any 70s enduro two-stroke would be fine for a small bike for around town.
Sweet on the road too.
They're a blast. I had a DT 125 in college for a little bit, and that thing was great. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it really depends on your budget, I guess.
Well, I mean, you got to look at it this way too. Oil and new tires are two things that you're going to put on any old bike that you buy. True. So, even if you've come across a nice CB350 or 360, you don't want to run those, what the chances are, old dry rotted tires.
Right.
And you're going to want to change the oil. So those two things right there, chances are the tank is going to have rust in it.
Yeah.
So, I think $700 is a fair place to start with that, and you're going to be putting that money into virtually any bike you buy.
That's true.
And if you want to get something you can use now with putting minimal into it, that's going to be kind of a longer investment, I guess, that you can run around on and then likely get your money at least back out of it if you decide to sell it. But I mean, I would even think about keeping the CL175 around. It might just be like a project if you want to just kind of take your time and it just be an outlet almost, just something you can just get dirty in the garage.
Even if the tank's rusted, if it's not leaking, I mean, just put a little cheap fuel filter on it and run it, Yeah. If it doesn't plug up too bad, it'll get you by.
Yeah, or if there's no holes that you have to be
he didn't say it was leaking, so I mean, if it's just rusty, put a fuel filter in it. I was there in college with a cheap, shitty bike, and you do whatever you can that doesn't cost any money to get by for a little bit. There's no shame in that.
Yeah.
Let's see. Some other comments. I posted a comment on the website, and I will put up a page explaining how to do this. But if you want to download the podcast so you can save it to an MP3 player or your phone or something, at the top of each episode page on our website, which is motorbikemondays.com, you can you'll see a player at the top of the page. That's it's like in Flash, so you can play it on the page. But there's a link underneath it, right beneath the player, that says download. So if you want to save the podcast, just right-click on it in your web browser and say save as or save link as or whatever your browser says, and that'll let you just pick a place to save it on your computer, and that'll let you save the MP3 file. They're usually like 30 to 50 megabytes, so they're not horrible. So anyways, feel free to download it. Anytime you want. They're all up there on the website for you to grab. So that covers our emails and comments.
What's in the shop?
What's in the shop? Yeah.
This is Brady. I got the.
Hi, Brady.
I still have those two bikes, the XS750 and the CB550 in the shop right now. I've kind of designated my time to the CB550 the past week, and I am today. Well, I almost finished paint prep on it today, but my grinder when I had it on the wire wheel, kind of getting all the old paint off the tank. Took a crap on me today, and the grinder that I've had for 7 years finally blew up. And
Rest in peace, grinder.
What was it?
It's a nice DeWalt one.
Yeah, I mean it wasn't nice, but it lasted 7 years. I think the brushes went out, worn down, and then somehow caused a short, and black soot, electrical black soot, just fired out of it. So
I've got a Makita that I've had for like 6 years. I'm gonna be real bummed when that thing.
One more year, man.
It's still going strong. I'm not worried about it.
I just buy the Harbor Freight one, and it's $15.
That
and
gets you through one job.
No way, dude. I've had this one for probably 6 months now, and
you're ahead of the curve.
It just went out, I lost the little locking pin to take the wheel off. Just broke.
So
now we're grinderless.
So you're down to your last wheel.
But yeah, we're grinderless.
Yeah.
But
I'll buy one tomorrow.
The nice thing about the Harbor Freight one is it has a lifetime warranty. So I just take it back to Harbor Freight and they give me a brand new one. And it works great.
They do lifetime warranties,
dude, on all of their stuff.
Look, I can take a dump and put a warranty on it, and it's still a piece of shit.
Well, yeah, because it's a dump.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it doesn't matter, dude.
All right, that wasn't great enough.
I stand by that grinder because I've used it for everything. It's good.
It's honestly, it's not that bad. I've used it.
It
I was
works.
thoroughly surprised, but I don't.
It wasn't as good. It wasn't as smooth as the DeWalt one, but
no, because the hamster inside can't sit in the wheel very bad. But you won't find one of those in Jesse James' shop.
Yeah. So
you won't find a lot of the tools we have in Jesse James'
I'm in paint prep, or finishing up paint prep, and then after the weekend I'll start on paint on that. And XS750 is patiently waiting. I just have to finish up a seat on that, and then it's right behind it.
Glad you're having better luck with your XS750 than I am with mine.
I've been out of town for work, but I'm still working on that CB550. It's making progress. Got the tires in today, so probably mount those tomorrow. Take the old ones off and mount the new ones on there, just to do the final stance mock-up and everything. Got to finish the seat hoop. We bought a new bender for the shop, so that's a game changer.
That's awesome.
And I got a Triumph hardtail in there right now that a customer needs some fab work done, some welding tabs and sissy bar and stuff. That came in today.
What is it?
It's a Triumph 650.
I saw the dark quickly.
It's a 650.
I don't think it's a pre-unit.
Yeah, I don't think it is either.
When did that change? That was like early 60s, right?
Yeah.
I don't know Triumphs very well.
I know people who know Triumph, so
I don't really know Triumphs. But anyway, so that'll be something quick. Maybe I'll post some pictures of that. And the TX 500 came back.
That's back in the shop, right?
Yeah. The guy who bought it, his first bike, and it just, I don't know. It runs great. I rode it over here.
Stopped running?
Yeah, he was just getting frustrated with it. It's just a little tricky because it was built to be kickstart only, super low profile, whatever. And for a first rider, having a bike that's kickstart only can be frustrating.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And you can't just push an electric start and have it start. So, and sometimes kicking a bike over isn't the easiest thing if it's your first bike,
Yeah, and which I'm sure a lot of people know. When you're dealing with old bikes, each bike has its own starting procedure.
Yeah. It's got its own little thing that it likes to do. So it's a learning process.
Yeah, definitely. I think if that procedure was explained to him, which I'm sure it was again.
Yeah, it's got to be gone over with him and
yeah.
like have him do it with you standing there, kind of show him what to do.
But you brought it back to take a look at it just to make sure.
Yeah, just to make sure everything was good, and now I get to ride it. So, but yeah, that's what I got.
But, and still the 550 in the shop that you're working on.
I already said it.
All right,
that was the first thing I said.
Screw me.
But hey, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, thank you.
Hey, glad you can make it. You know, a little late, but.
Well, let's see. So I finally got to work on the XS 750. Brady was over helping me with it last night. So I had the top end apart. I was chasing a very strange noise when the engine's turning over. I've got a video on my phone, so I'm gonna play this so you guys can hear this noise. Maybe if you have any ideas, send us an email. Okay, so this is a noise turning the engine over, like not attempting to start it, but just listening to this noise coming from the top end. So listen to this.
It's like a 77, I think, XS 750 top end noise.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. So anyways, I don't know how familiar you are with these, but they're not supposed to make that.
Yeah,
that like
you've got a couple of different, like you got guys in there with snare drums, and they just snare drums.
Oh, it's like the little wind up monkey
right.
That's it sounds just like that, but much louder.
Yeah, it's got a very severe like clacking noise when the engine's turning over. I've run the bike before, and the noise. It's been a while, but I'm almost positive it does not do that when the engine's running, and this is just when trying to start it.
You got oil in there, right?
Yeah, there's oil in it.
Okay.
But it's pretty gnarly. Like I don't know exactly what's causing it, but I need to figure it out. So anyways, that's where I'm at right now. The bike's back together. They are a nightmare to get the cams back in and timed correctly.
Especially if you have the cam change still.
It did not split the cam chain, so it was a lot of work. But it's back together. I'm going to get it running. I think I'm going to sell it at this point. I'm kind of losing interest in it. So if anybody's interested, got a nice, pretty clean XS 750 triple for sale for cheap. So, anyways, and then...
And it will drum roll for you.
Yeah, it makes some cool noises.
What it seems like is... I've never run across this in a noise like that before.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it might be the valve slapping against the valve seats on the head is what's making that noise, because it's happening every rotation on the intake cam side.
I don't think it's tied to either cam. I mean,
I don't think
if it's a valve issue. Noise, it's happening on every single valve.
I mean, the only thing that, without opening up the head and checking it out, like what makes sense in my head is that there are stiffer springs that were put in there, and it's so high sprung that it's slapping back the valve.
Okay, if that was true, why would that noise go away when the engine's running at higher RPM? Like. When it's
it
running,
could be like start. Well,
why would that noise go away?
I mean, this is also assuming that it goes away.
Yeah, I could be wrong. That's why.
I mean, it was ran with straight pipes, so it's probably hard to hear it at that.
Yeah,
volume.
I only ran it for 30 seconds, but I am like 99% sure it goes away when it's running. But either way, we'll see. Maybe I'll figure it out. Maybe I'll sell it. I don't know.
Maybe all the valves are bent.
Yeah, could be, as far as I know.
Inquiries start flooding in now.
See, this is a good lesson what you get with a $500 bike. So, sometimes you can score, sometimes you end up with a drum solo inside your engine.
Well, now you just told how much you
Lars
paid for it. So.
I'm not expecting to get much more than that out of it, so I'm not really concerned.
All right.
Then I'm still working on the RMZ motor, which I've gone over in detail in the last couple of weeks about my wonderful experience with this goddamn dirt bike.
Yeah, those parts look really nice, though.
Yeah, so I have a full engine rebuild kit, a full Wiseco kit, crankshaft, connecting rod, bearings, piston, gaskets, you name it, everything. So
They do a good job. Even the gaskets look pretty.
Yeah, it's a nice kit. I mean, all of that's about $500 for every single part for the motor.
Yeah, it's really
So
not bad at all.
It's not too bad. It'll be a brand new motor when it's done. Let's see. So I'm working on that, and then I still have this nice R90 BMW sitting here, trying to figure out what's going to happen with that. Is it just me, or is like this getting quieter?
I think it's just you.
I wonder if
Maybe. I don't know.
connection's bad.
We'll find out.
This is what we get when we're using like ancient microphones and
Hey,
shit.
hey guys, can you hear me? Is it getting quieter over there?
These things have like 10 years of live use on them, and they're wrecked. Anyway, so that's what's going on in my shop.
That's what's going on in my shop.
And mine.
So what are we talking about today,
it.
guys?
Today we are talking about carb cleaning, which I suspect this will be a hot topic for many people out there.
Yeah.
I think when you hear carb cleaning, you think of a undoable task.
Yeah, you don't have to go pay like.
Usually shops are charging like $100 a carb.
Yeah, which is
that's
insane.
average.
Which if you're using a inline 4 with each individual carbs, that's $400 that can easily be tackled in an hour max.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to get into bikes, this is something you should get familiar with. You don't even need to be an expert at it. You just need the basic knowledge. And the number one thing is, like, get over your fear of doing it and tear them apart.
Yeah,
Once you
take
look
it
at
apart.
Them, they're not that complicated.
Take it apart before you make your decision on where if you're going to take them in. There's nothing
If
to
you've gotten that far, that you've already done the hardest thing, which is getting them off the bike.
Yeah, that's true a lot of the time.
But we'll let you make that decision. We're going to start running through that process with you, and pretty much just go through and tell you what to look for, spots to clean, and things, components, jets, needles to inspect, and we're going to start through this.
Some tips some tips and tricks if you're doing that.
tips and tips.
Did I say that?
No,
Anyways, they'll save you some time.
Yeah, definitely. And once again, this is not a difficult task. I think a lot of it is the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
And so hopefully we can explain it accurate enough to where it might encourage you to get that bike of yours running properly or get that bike running.
Well, on an old bike that's new to you, this is a safe thing to do anyways.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, definitely.
But this is like the number one thing that bikes come into shops for, I would think. Like when your bike's not running and then you go to a forum and ask why,
poorly.
The number one thing somebody's going to tell you is clean the carburetor.
Yeah, and a lot of mechanic shops too will have a bike come in and say, "Oh yeah, no, you probably need a carb clean too," and chances are probably not. But it's another way that they can kind of get a build from you.
Yeah. But do it yourself, save the money,
and learn something.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, we tried to break it up into a general kind of systematic process. Not one carb is the same. Well, for the most part, but there's a lot of different designs, I guess, on carbs. So we're going to go through the basics.
Well, let's talk
They
about.
did use this. Like, there's a handful of carbs that they used on different models across like Yamaha and Kawasaki.
Yeah, but we're not going to be going into
Most of them.
specifics.
No, yeah, I'm just saying.
On the Jap bikes are going to be a Kian or a Mikuni carb, and they really are broken down into two types. There's the direct slide carb where the cable is actually actuating the slides directly, and then
I call
there's
those mechanical carbs or mechanical slides. It's just the way that I labeled, I'm sure.
I don't. I've always called them direct.
That sounds
slide,
right to me.
But that
mechanical slide.
I don't know what they're actually called.
Hang it around me.
The other kind is CV carbs, which stands constant velocity, right?
Yeah.
And they're called vacuum carburetors.
Which are a nightmare
They're
to tune at least.
To tune, not a big deal to clean.
No.
I mean, they're just as simple as the other, but
Most of the time, a lot easier.
Yeah,
because you have to like unbolt something to get the slides off of the mechanical slides.
Yeah, because
what just happened there?
I don't know.
but don't be too worried about which type you have for the moment, because the process is going to be pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So let's start with the tools you would need to set aside if you're going to get started doing this?
Phillips screwdriver and a flathead screwdriver can just about cover most of the bases. Removing
The carbs off the bike.
No, I mean we're going at this with the carbs off the bike since it is.
Well, a Phillips head and a flathead will take the carbs off the bike for you.
Sometimes an Allen.
Yeah.
Sometimes an Allen. Key.
But
Well,
you can look that up. I mean, again, revert back to your manual, and they'll tell you how to rip that thing out.
Pretend they're sitting on your bench in front of you.
Exactly. So Phillips and flathead will pretty much get you open to. Well, we'll go into that. And socket set or wrench set. This is primarily again.
To get the jet's main jet out. You know,
yeah, like the
maybe
main
like
jet holder and emulsion tubes.
An 8, a 10, a 12. They'll
Yeah.
probably cover anything you'd come across inside it.
I mean,
you need some carb cleaner. Get a can or two.
I recommend a can per carb you have.
Yeah. Because the more
goes
the more the
fast.
better.
Yeah.
Just
and
don't
then
get it in your eyes.
Wire brush is really good.
Wire brush. I primarily use the wire brush, not necessarily to clean out stuff. Sometimes if it's heavily varnished, I'll get in there with
And
some
the
carb
float
cleaner
bowl,
and the
yeah.
float bowls. The float bowls are in the bottom of the carb. The float bowl is what essentially holds the fuel in place, or holds the fuel. And that's where most of your varnish and your old gas is going to be at, and it's where most of your varnish is going to happen. Your old gas is going to sit.
Yeah.
I could have said that a lot simpler
You
and
could
faster.
have. You took like 4 sentences more than that's all right.
I wasn't prepared for
We're
that.
not on a schedule here, so that's fine. You can set up. All right, what was I thinking of? The for a brush, I use sometimes like you can get those plastic brushes at AutoZone or something that have like nylon bristles that are stiff. Those work really well too, and they don't scratch up the housing or anything, or scratch up the float bowl. It helps sometimes to like have like I have what looks like an ice pick, basically like a screwdriver handle, but with a really sharp point on it.
Mm.
That helps for like tapping out the pivot pin for the float.
Yeah.
You know, some
The
small
float post.
like dental picks, basically, that have like the little curve on the end and a point.
Mm.
Those are helpful for like getting the little washer and gasket out of the mixture screw. You know, stuff like that. So you don't have to have those, but some small sharp tools that'll help you kind of pick out stuff is useful. An air compressor is.
I wouldn't say like required,
It's not
but
required,
it is.
It makes it easier.
Yeah.
It helps out.
I would say it's like on the verge of being required,
Yeah,
because you
definitely.
can't guarantee a carb is actually clean until
So
you
you shoot it out with some
blasted it out.
compressed air.
Yeah. So I would have an air compressor if at all possible.
And you don't need a massive one. I mean,
No,
those
not at all.
little shotgun. Well, sometimes those are pretty powerful. I mean, a little guy, even like an airbrush compressor,
Yeah.
could work.
One of those little pancake compressors. You know, you can get one for like
Mm.
$50 at Harbor Freight. That doesn't matter what it is. You don't need a lot of pressure. You just
Yeah.
need some compressed air.
Just to blow out some of that gunk that you're breaking
And
free.
more than what you get in like one of those little computer duster cans or something.
Yeah.
I've seen people do that before. And then a carb rebuild kit, it's optional for sure, because, you know, I mean, if you can find them and they're not too expensive, it's not bad, obviously, to replace the parts that wear out. But 9 times out of 10, the float itself is fine. The gasket is, you know, if it's not super old, a lot of times the gasket on the float bowl is reusable.
Yeah.
You might find that some of the rubber stuff is usually what fails, like the little rubber O-ring on the oil, the fuel mixture screw. Those things fall apart.
Yeah.
The gas that we have now is just like it just eats rubber and stuff. Especially if it sits, it'll varnish in no time, and it'll really tear up the rubber parts. So.
Yeah. And a lot of the times too, I would say like a complete carb kit is required if say you've got components like jets are say missing, tampered, or you just want to revert back to stock if they've been jetted for pipes or pods or individual filters.
Yeah.
If you want to go back to stock, that's your stock rebuild kit.
Right.
But if you're looking for just like the rubbers, like just the or gaskets, you can more than likely find just those sets individually and save money where you don't need all these stock parts. Especially if you are going to go with say individual filters or a more free-flowing exhaust, you are going to have to rejet it. So you can save cost if you do have to just replace the rubber or the gaskets on the carbs. You don't need those stock jets that are going to be included in the full kit. So
Right.
You can save money there.
There's usually you can get an economy rebuild kit, like a K&L, a distributor I use. Like they usually, for most popular carburetors, they have two lines: the full rebuild that comes with jets and a float and everything, and you're looking at like $60 a carb or something. And then they have the economy kit, which is really just all the seals and rubber, and that's
$10.
Yeah, it's like $10-15, and that's 9 times out of 10. That's all you need.
Yeah, and if you're looking at like say you have a bent needle, which can be very common, you can buy that needle separately. I go through jetsrus.com. When I am tuning, I buy my needles jets
I've
from
used
there.
them too.
And they have
Almost everything.
they have like the OEM stuff too, and for like a little cheaper, they have like the not OEM, which are the same thing, just they can't guarantee like the precise.
That's good to
Hold
know.
on.
Yeah. So I mean, you save a couple bucks there, but I mean, they're not much more for the OEM.
Have you seen Sudco's website?
Mm-mm.
They do all they do is carburation. It's sudco.com, I think, and they're a distributor. I don't think they sell direct to customers; they only sell to businesses. But they have detailed schematics and breakdowns of carburetors, almost every carburetor you can
That's
think
cool.
of. So their website's kind of clunky. It's kind of hard to find stuff, but it's there if you look hard enough. So that's a resource if you need to track down. You have a part and you can't figure out where it goes or something.
And it might be nice actually to have that available while you're doing it, so you can kind of see where things are going and how to possibly decipher how to get things or remove things.
Yeah, your the microfiche for your bike will usually have a exploded diagram of the carburetor. I've just noticed that they're kind of hard to read in detail sometimes.
Definitely.
Well, what's hard to read is the numbers that are pointing to it, and then you go down the line, and it's like, oh, is that a 5 or is that an 8?
Yeah. Well, for dealing with the bike in the 70s, they're literally scans of old microfiche, and the quality, it just blows sometimes. It's good to have the information, but you can't always read it.
So, remove the carbs. When you're doing so, definitely shut off the petcock. Make sure there's no fuel flowing to the cars while you're taking it off. Right. And at this point, I would drain the float bowls. I think we touched over it in the last podcast, how to do so. And if they are, say, clogged up, just remove them and you'll drain the fluid or the fuel that's in there when you have them on the table.
There's a good chance that you're going to get gas on your hands when you're doing this.
Yeah. I would plan on spilling some gas.
I don't think the people doing this are going to be that timid to worry about that. Get some gloves.
Yeah.
And so at this point, definitely clean your work area because you are dealing with a lot of smaller parts and can easily be lost or misplaced very easily. Start with a clean environment. I usually set a couple shop rags down, and that kind of designates my area I'm going to work at and almost acts as a little mental barrier to where don't put anything outside of these rags.
I used to get I lost them a while back, but the little red trays that you get from In-N-Out when you get there, I used to steal those, and I had 3 or 4 of them.
That sounds so good right now, by the way.
Yeah, I'm ready for some In-N-Out after this. But those red trays are perfect because they're 3 inches tall, and they're a foot long basically. So you can fit the carb inside it. You drop any parts, they're stuck inside. Those things are awesome, and they won't gas. Whatever the hell they make them out of, gas and oil.
That'd probably be a good tool to use to clean them in too, if you're soaking the carbs.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah, you'd have to probably have to flip
them
them
a lot. Yeah,
you may not get the middle.
but you're also not using as much solution too.
I always use a coffee can, a metal coffee can for that. Or
That's
plastic.
good.
Yeah.
That's what I use to soak carbs in.
Brady was talking about he puts like shop towels down. That's a good idea too, because when you're taking out these little parts, and say if you were just working on like a workbench that is wood colored or brown or red or whatever, these parts might come kind of like invisible to see, on your work surface. But if you're on a paper towel or a shop rag or whatever, they kind of will pop out a little more, so you see them and they're noticeable, and you're not knocking them off.
Yeah, there's small stuff you can drop, so you want to eliminate losing anything. So if the carbs are off on the bench, first take off the float bowl. You need to pull off the top and the bottom of the carburetors, basically, so you can get to everything. The float bowl is usually four screws. A lot of times they're Phillips heads. Same with the top. A lot of times the caps are 4 screws. Sometimes they're 2. Depends on what it is. Often on older carbs, the screws are stripped.
Very commonly stripped.
They always use the Japanese Phillips head screws that have like a really weird pitch to them, and a standard, unless you have that exact screwdriver, a standard Phillips will feel like it will fit, but it will slip back out very easily.
It's not quite a number 1 screwdriver, but it's not quite a number 2 screwdriver.
Some asshole in World War II engineered it when they were pissed off at us, and they had just bombed Pearl, and they're feeling really good about themselves, and they start designing these bikes, and that guy really wanted to stick it to Uncle Sam, so he went and designed this goddamn Phillips that's just a little bit different than the common screwdriver. So, yeah, we're still paying for that.
Yeah.
Anyways, you can get them off. One thing that really helps is an impact screwdriver.
Yes.
That you can
drill
lock in.
Drill might be a little.
I've used
drills on them, but I think that the impact
it's less forgiving.
Hammer, you can get them at Harbor Freight. Although I've broken more of those than I can count. I finally bought a good one at Sears or something.
Yeah, you can get a good one for like $30.
Because the tool doesn't break, but what's important is that you get the hardened tips.
Yeah.
And the ones at Harbor Freight are cheap, and the tips can't handle the impact and they shatter. So, you could even just get the tool from Harbor Freight and then get some better bits. Yeah, there you go.
That's the word.
That's what I was looking for. Tips works.
Yeah, but at that time, I mean, you're already spending $25 just in doing that, piecing it together. You might as well just buy a good set, $35.
I would spend the money on that.
But regardless,
try and get the screws off first. Don't go buy that tool until you give it a shot. But if you do strip them, don't panic, because this has happened to everybody.
But that tool is also going to come in handy on the rest of the bike.
You'll use that is.
I'd say that's almost a required tool for
an old bike. You gotta have it.
That essential rust that is holding the bike together. It makes it a little bit more difficult when you're trying to pull it apart.
Right.
So remove the float bowl, and at this point, it's going to expose you to the float, jets, and your essentially what is working in the carburetor. So at this point, too, you can find out just how bad your carburetors are condition-wise. When old gas breaks down, it can be bad enough to where it is like a thick molasses. And when we talk about caramel, when we talk about varnish, this is what we're talking about. And so at this point, just go ahead and work on disassembling everything. Removing your jets, the mixer screw, and when we're talking about this, we're going to be talking about singularity. And if you have multiple carbs, apply these to all of the carbs, of course.
And you can also look up what we're talking. If you don't recognize the part we're talking about, like what the hell's a mixer screw, Google it.
Yeah,
find a picture.
We'll try. I mean, I'll look tonight and try to find a photo that can kind of describe.
You know what we should post? Almost every service manual, especially from like 70s and 80s, has a page explaining how carburetors work.
That's right.
And they really do a good job of explaining it. They show where the air goes, where the fuel goes, how it gets mixed. That will, tell you how it works and show you where all the parts are.
If you have a Honda Honda came out with a very sweet carb manual that covers every carburetor that was on these old Honda bikes. We have that in the shop.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That'd be cool to see.
Yeah, and you can download it in PDF form, and it's pretty cool. There's a lot of useful information in there. But yeah, in your manual, there'll be a page, and there will be a picture of your carburetor, and then the next picture will be your carburetor like cut in half.
Yeah.
You know, like a direct inside view kind of thing, and it labels everything. And so just use that. It comes in very handy when you're rebuilding carbs.
Well, and you'll learn, like, once you do one, even if the next carburetor you do is a different model or a different shape, they all work basically the same way.
They all have the same parts.
You'll be able to identify what part is what as you start working on different carburetors. So, once you got it all apart, really don't, pay attention to what part is coming out of where, but don't panic too much if you mix stuff up, because really everything only will fit in one spot.
Yeah.
So you can't really put it back together wrong.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you can put some carburetors have a primary and secondary main jet, which are identical
That's
but
true.
different sizes.
That's true.
If your carbs have this,
What bike has that? I mean, I've seen that, but
the
what
dual
does?
red CB750s. The nightmare that I'm working on. And so at this point, what I usually do to keep it in order is, say, take a Sharpie on one of the posts that the main jet is on, and then I'll just throw those jets in a pile, say in a Tupperware thing with that same Sharpie marker on it.
Or use sandwich bags, like the little Ziploc bags. I use those on every bike I work on. When I take stuff apart, if I want to make sure I know where it goes back, I just toss it in a sandwich bag and then just write on it with the Sharpie so I know where it went. Or draw a little picture.
Yeah, I make diagrams.
So you know where it goes. I do stuff like that all the time. Another thing I do, I'll just throw this in because I thought of it, not totally related to carburetors, or really at all, but when I take apart stuff, like for instance a stator cover or a clutch cover or something that has a bunch of different bolts around it.
They're different sizes?
Yeah, and they're different sizes. I take a piece of cardboard and I draw out just a rough sketch of the outline of the part, of the cover or something, and then I put dots and mark where the bolts go, and then stab it with the screwdriver, and then I push the bolts through. And it's you always have a piece of cardboard or paper or something lying around.
Yeah.
Do that, and then you never have to worry about what bolt goes where.
Yeah, definitely.
Carbs, it doesn't matter. They're usually, the float bolt and the cover usually have identical bolts for all four or whatever. So it's
or something like that too. Like if you're taking something off the bike and you're going to have all this hardware, you can put it back through the mounting holes on the bike.
Yeah, that's
what
true.
I do.
I do that too.
Yeah, I usually, if I take a bolt off, I remove what I need to and put it back where it goes. That's just a good habit to have, and you will cut down on losing bolts and nuts significantly.
Yeah, and looking for diagrams on what bolts bolt in the engine to the frame and trying to figure out where
that's
it goes.
a nightmare.
But at this point, and removing the jets are generally pretty easy. It's usually a flathead.
Make sure though you use, when you're trying to remove, like for instance the pilot jet, which is the small skinny one, make sure you use, so the jet will have a hole in the middle of it and there'll be a slot for a flathead and it'll be slotted on either side. Make sure you use a flathead that fits well and fits the groove on either side, because if you use one that's too small, first of all, if it's too big, you won't be able to get it down in the hole. If it's too small, you won't get a good grip on both sides, and it's a really easy way to screw up the jet. You'll chip off parts of it.
Exactly.
And
because they're copper, so
brass.
they're brass, so they're super soft.
Now, you probably won't destroy it to the point it's not usable, but you might chew it up, and you won't be able to get it out or in easily.
And so at this point, if it's badly varnished, I would take some carb cleaner and start spraying it in there, let it soak in and help break it up. This will definitely help you remove the different components in the carburetor, especially with when you're removing the float. That's like the little balloon guys. Could have used a better description, but you'll notice them.
They look like a nutsack, kind of.
A little bit. And so They're often they are held in place by two posts and
an arm.
An arm that slides through those posts and through the slide.
That's where I was talking about that
pick.
That pick, like an ice pick kind of thing. You can usually use that to tap the pin out easily. Sometimes they'll be kind of stuck if they haven't been removed in a long time.
Yeah,
so
and I've also used a small drill bit that fits either the slightly smaller diameter or
I've used real small Phillips with a sharp point.
Yeah,
and it's just enough to poke it out so you can grab the other side.
Yeah, usually once you dislodge one side, it'll pull out the other easily.
And if it's still giving you problems, which has happened to me many times, I've used like needle nose to catch one of the ends that are slightly out and kind of just rotate back and forth to kind of twist it out of spot, which can help and definitely be continuously spraying, not continuously, but intermittently spraying carb cleaner on that as well to help continue to break it up, because it will break it up, and then as it dries, this stuff is extremely sticky. It can, as the carb cleaner dries or evaporates, it will become that sticky again. So remove that. Then once you remove the float, you'll see the float needle, which is under that, which is controlled by the float. Pull that out of its seat and give this an inspection. What you're looking for is if that little beveled end is
it'll
rounded.
Usually have a rubber tip on
rubber,
it.
I mean, some of the older bikes.
Sometimes they're solid.
Yeah, they're solid brass.
Yeah, that's right.
And so check to see if like that little tip is broke off or rounded. And at this point, you can kind of figure out if, say, you know what, I could use that carb rebuild kit. And
that's something that if you notice that the tip is deformed at all, you want to replace it, because that right there is what controls
the flow of fuel
coming into the carburetor from the fuel source, from the tank. So
you also want to check the spring side too. Like if it's sticking, then
it'll still work. I mean, you might have to adjust your float height if it is adjustable to it, but you might as well replace it. They're cheap, like $2 a pop.
Pay attention to how the needle was either attached or comes in contact with the float.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the needle has a little hook on it, and it hangs on a tab on the float. Sometimes they are just actuated by the float pressing against it. In that case, there's nothing to think about, But if the needle is actually attached to the float, it'll be very obvious. Just look at it before you take it apart so you see how it is attached.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing with once you have the floats off, there's a couple different kinds of floats. There's fully brass floats that are soldered together and they're hollow on the inside, and then there's like plastic floats that are solid.
Those are usually bulletproof.
Right.
The brass ones can sometimes spring a leak.
Yeah, with the brass ones, what you're looking for, a good way to test it is stick them in a bowl of water, and if it floats, check for bubbles. When you submerge it in the water, there shouldn't be any bubbles coming up. Take it out and shake it. If you can hear water or fluid in there, that means your float is bad. You got to replace it. Mm-hmm. Or if you can solder that hole closed, you can
I've tried. I've never had.
It's really hard to do.
And because you can't risk a bad float, because that's responsible for shutting off the fuel supply when the float bowl is full of gas. And if that doesn't work correctly, like if you found a hole in it or something, the float will actually take on. It's like the Titanic. Like it'll take on gas and actually sink in the float bowl.
Yeah, and then it's just going to pour just fuel in there, and you're just going to overflow. The float bowl. So at this point, pretty much what you're going to be looking for at this point is any brass that is in the carb. You're going to want to remove that as much as possible. Some stuff won't really. I mean, if it's brass in there, it can come out, but chances are there will be. Not chances are, but sometimes there's pressed-in jets and other components. If you don't want to take the task to pull those out, it's pretty much safe to leave those in. Just make sure that if are meant to be passed through, that there's a clear passage through those.
Yep.
And at this point, I take all my brass and soak them in carb cleaner.
Yeah, put them in a little bowl or something.
Yeah, or
Fill it up with
I
carb
even
cleaner.
use the float bowl itself to
that works.
house the to jets or anything that came out of that one. I just put right in there and fill it up with carb cleaner. Especially if the bottom of the float bowl is full of varnish, this helps break it up as well.
Yeah.
If you didn't get a carb kit though, be careful with your main jets, especially if they're press-in and they have an O-ring on them. Don't put that in the carb cleaner because it'll just eat that O-ring right away, and then you'll be forced to find an O-ring that size.
Yeah, rubber and
carb cleaner definitely
does not mix.
The carb cleaner will dry out the rubber, and it won't create a seal at that point. So,
did you already mention removing the slide?
We haven't gotten there. We're still on the bowls.
Okay.
So, at this point, I would leave this. I mean, you can do this in any order, or roughly any order, but at this point, I usually go and open up the slide, take the slide cover off on the top of the carb, and on this, this is pretty much where the main difference between the two different style of carburetors come into play. On a CV style carb, you remove the top cover, and the slide will essentially usually just slide right out. The slide is designed to be free floating, so remove the slide. Check the needle. Make sure that's clean.
One thing, if you get to that point,
check the diaphragm.
So check the diaphragm. You'll have a black rubber ring that's attached to the top of the slide and then fits into a groove around the top of the carburetor. So one thing, if it's an old carb and it's been on there for a long time, the diaphragm, the rubber might actually be stuck to the housing. So you want to be real careful loosening it up and popping it off. Don't tear it. If they're old and kind of brittle, you don't want to risk actually tearing the rubber.
Yeah.
And then inspect it. Look for any tears, any pinholes in it. You really need to make sure that there's no break or holes in the rubber.
Yeah, because that needs that vacuum, that
seal.
You want to hear like a properly working diaphragm. You'll hear like a little swoop kind of sound.
When you're actually
when the carb is complete, you want to hear that. And you also want to check the slide and make sure that it moves freely in the cylinder of the carb body. If it doesn't, spray some carb cleaner around. I usually work it with my fingers. It helps kind of break it off, and you can feel that varnish will be sticky, and so you'll know for sure that you got all of it off. And go on the inside of the cylinder walls of the carb body itself as well.
Right.
And so if you are, actually we'll go into this when we go about carb tuning. At this point you want to make sure that the needle, again, is
sliding down all the way into that acid.
Also inspect this. The needles can commonly be bent. Even the slightest bent can cause a hindrance in that slide.
Yeah.
Or that
and the fuel metering.
From the fuel, exactly, metering. And so check this. If it is bent, don't even try to straighten it out because you're dealing with such very low tolerances that replace it at this point.
Yeah.
While you have the slides out, too, we've run across this a couple times. This just happened to Brady, actually. Check the outsides of the slides because sometimes, I've seen they form like a little bubble or like a bump on it.
Oh, yeah.
That makes it, that shouldn't be there. And so when you're sliding it down in the slide, it has so much more resistance, and it's making it really tight when it's opening and closing.
Yeah, and that can affect your throttle.
Yeah, so you want to,
because you're fighting that on, like, say, the mechanical slides, or what's the other word for them? The not CV slides.
The direct
slides. Yeah, that's probably more accurate.
Yeah, so you just want to make sure that they're still cylindrical and smooth, and there's not any pitting or any
Well, just
bump
slide
set
it up and
deformed.
down by hand in the housing and just make sure it needs to slide
And
Freely.
freely.
This is very important on the CB style carbs.
Mhm.
Yeah, if they stick at all, you've got to find out why.
Yeah, and now on the mechanical slides, as I'm currently calling them.
I'm down with mechanical slides.
Yeah.
That's what I've always
Let's
thought they
just
were
do
called.
it.
I'm not going to change.
All right, go for it.
There's a wall. There's a line
Yeah.
here.
These ones, I mean,
We
they
work
can
at
be
our
a-
shop. You work at yours.
Definitely.
Well,
a
we're
little,
in my shop, so
Okay.
you got to use my word.
Touche.
Yeah, so these, chances are there's a bolt that's actually connected to an arm that the slide is connected to. I don't think it's needed to go into detail because they do vary from carburetor to carburetor.
Yeah, totally.
Do your research, figure it out yourself, and how to pull it out, and do the same inspection on these as well. You're not going to be dealing with the diaphragm, so you don't have to look for that.
And just pay attention to everything when you're taking it apart. Like, don't just start tearing everything apart thinking you're going to be able to put it right back together.
Yeah, take
Yeah.
your time and note where everything goes.
Yeah.
And this is key to be organized at this point, too.
Take some pictures,
Yeah.
with your phone or something, and so you know where everything was when you first took it apart. But then once you have, so at this point you've got everything disassembled. You have all the jets and all the little pieces out, soaking in carb cleaner in the float bowl. You have the slide out. So now you're ready to actually clean the carburetor itself.
Yeah. Oh, also, just a little side note: don't take off anything you don't need to, especially if you're working with multiple carburetors. Leave them on the rack, the carb
Yeah,
rack,
oh,
and all
that's
the
true.
linkage. You can find yourself in a lot more work and than you are ready to get into. Some of that stuff can be pretty tricky. And they have to go back together exactly. And
Yeah, if you're dealing with a rack of carbs, 2 or 4, there's no need to clean them successfully. There's no need to actually split them apart.
Yeah.
You can easily leave them all
Yeah.
attached to each other. But once you have everything apart and all the individual parts are soaking, then hit with your bottle of carb cleaner, put the little straw nozzle thing on it, and just blast every single hole on the thing and give it a good couple second spray.
Just so it cleans out all those passageways.
Yeah, everyone. If you can find a hole on it, then
Spray it.
spray
Yeah.
it.
If you can find a hole, spray it.
yeah, even if it's blocked up,
Is that what
I
she
just
said?
do it. Even if it's
You can find a hole, spray it.
because there's a lot of ports and there are holes in the carburetor that are just blocked to deal with which side of the carburetor you're working with.
Right.
Even if it is blocked, I spray through it anyways,
Yeah,
just to be sure.
The worst thing that's going to happen is it's going to shoot back in your face.
Yeah. Watch your eyes on these.
Wear goggles, maybe.
Yeah, that's true. Be careful. Don't get it in
You
your
may look like a geek,
your eyes.
but-
It hurts. But yeah, hit every hole like Jenna
Hit every
Jameson,
hole.
man. Just
Yeah.
go to town on that
We
thing.
didn't have to go there, man.
It went there.
We
It's
didn't
been
have to
We're
go
gonna-
there.
We're gonna lose our G rating on iTunes. Just
rated M for mature.
just blast every hole on there, and use like Brady said earlier. Plan on using an entire can per carb,
Yeah.
and that way you got cleaner in every circuit on there.
Yeah, because there's not much of a substitute for carb cleaner in this process.
Yeah,
And when you're shooting the carb cleaner through the jets, blow through them as well, either with compressed air to definitely make sure to break up some of that stuff. But if they aren't too heavily clogged or filled up or varnished, I usually just blow through them with my mouth, and that way it clears out all of the remainder carb cleaner that is in those holes. And then look up, bring them up into a light. To what you're doing is looking to make sure that jet is completely clear, and you can visibly see the light coming through it.
if you have a air compressor, get the best thing to use. I found
Rubber
is,
tips.
Yeah, you get one of the little nozzles or whatever with a lever on it so you can
Shoot air.
shoot it really easy. I don't know, you know what I mean. But get the one that has a rubber tip on it, like a sharp point rubber tip, so that way you can actually seal it up against all the different holes on the carburetor for the jets. And I don't think we mentioned it, but if the carbs have individual chokes on them, they usually will unscrew or something. I don't know actually on the older. Did the older Hondas? How do the chokes work? Can you remove the choke? I guess
the
I'm
choke
talking
is
about dirt bike.
yeah,
carburetors.
it's mainly controlled by linkage.
Yeah.
And it's usually a choke valve.
Oh, all right. So
in the front. And then there are differences, like there are choke valved ones where it's a valve in the front that is essentially just cutting off air,
right.
and so it causes a richer condition in the carburetor.
And then there's also
enrichers, which is just another passage to suck in more fuel.
Right. Well, if you're dealing, I guess I'm thinking about single carbs on a dirt bike. They usually have a plunger choke that screws into the side of the housing.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, if the choke comes apart, disassemble it, remove the assembly. Like, for instance, on the old, like the BMWs that use Bing carburetors, those things all have a little choke assembly on the side of the carburetor that comes off with 4 screws. So, anyways, if the choke comes out, remove it so you can clean that as well.
Mm-hmm. And also, if you are running into an issue where the jets are severely clogged to where the steps before weren't clearing it up, this is where carb cleaning tools come in handy, or jet cleaning tools. They're long, kind of like ribbed wires that are very small to pass through the jets. I don't have one. I've never really needed to use for one. I either use my larger wire brush with the longer needle or longer.
And just pull out some of the wires out.
Yeah,
of it.
or even just slide the jet on the wires on the brush. You don't have to. Pull
You can
on.
use a guitar string.
Yeah,
guitar
you
string
can
as well.
use like
That's what I do.
Yeah,
you can use
usually
a
the
thin paper clip if it's small
the
enough.
E-string.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Or
found
with your
in my
main jets,
experience
a little bit thicker. But
yeah, in my experience, I mean, they're a little bit more flimsy, and the wire brush there hasn't been even through some smaller pilot jets seem to.
it's a more firm wire.
Yeah,
for sure.
so
Or if you have a wiry beard. No, I'm just kidding.
no.
But it's worth trying if you can't see light through the jet, even on the pilot jet with an extremely small hole.
Mhm.
You should be able to, if you hold it up to a light, you should be able to see light, a pinpoint of light through it. And if you can't see that, it's clogged. So
Yeah.
Don't
And,
put it back together as like thinking it's clean. If you can't actually see light, you got to get that taken care of.
Mm-hmm. And on pilot jets a lot, there will be it'll kind of go down to a thinner diameter, which will have small holes on the sides. Emulsion holes. And you want to make sure that those are clear as well. Same with the say jet holder. If it's on the carb, there'll be an emulsion tube in there as well, and you want to check every single hole. You want to make sure is clear, and
Then hit it with compressed air again.
compressed air, or just check.
I usually do each one a couple times
yeah.
just to make sure.
I mean, yeah, just compress air the whole thing. Just go through everything.
Yeah, it can't hurt.
And
So then, if your carburetor is like really filthy, because we didn't talk about soaking them, if it was really really bad and there's like noticeable varnish, like a dark red kind of color on the float bowls where you usually see it, then it's probably a good idea to soak the carburetors.
yeah, this will definitely save a lot of
Scrubbing time.
scrubbing.
Yeah.
Well, what I've done too, before I soak them in like a solution, like when I take the whole carb rack off, if they're all
Oh, your mic.
when I take the whole carb rack off, if they're filthy, like on the outside they'll be just gunky and dirty and muddy.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get some gasoline and I'll just throw them in a tub of gasoline, because gas will eat a lot of that stuff and it'll make it just kind of all fall off. And the difference with working with a somewhat clean carburetor versus something disgusting and dirty
it
is
makes
like
a big difference.
night and day.
Yeah.
But then once you take them apart, we soak them. You can throw them back in that gasoline when they're apart too, if you want to. And that'll eat a lot of stuff. It'll even eat the old varnish to some extent. But
you can get some things to soak them in. You can get like buckets, like gallon buckets of cleaner.
Usually Chem Dip.
Chem Dip,
Yeah, Chem Dip.
There's another one.
Is it?
Berry Mints. Oh, that is Chem Dip.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what I'm
the
thinking.
B12 Chem Dip.
So that stuff is amazing, but it's gnarly stuff. It's like really strong. It's
Yeah.
also really expensive.
Yeah, I don't tend to use it.
I don't use it very
Primarily
often.
because in California, we get the crappy stuff, the
Yeah.
50 state stuff. If you are not in California, you've got good carb cleaner, good chemicals you can use to clean this. It'll make it dramatically more efficient and easier. But if you do go this route, make sure that you remove all rubber that is on the carbs.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's with the carb cleaner.
Yes, with the carb cleaner and the Chem Dip.
Yeah.
Or a carb cleaner or a substance like this that you're dipping them in.
And don't even assume like you can get away with it for a few minutes. There will be no
Yeah,
rubber left if you
definitely.
go that route.
And this is when you want to make sure too that if you're dipping the whole rack in, that there's no there's no rubber on that. And a lot of the times there'll be float vents passage that have if you're dealing with multiple carburetors, a rubber hose connecting those two together.
Yeah.
This will dry out. And you can probably get a little bit easier away with that one. Essentially, you just want to vent, like if it's a floatable vent, you just need to vent it to the atmosphere. So you can kind of get away with that one, but you want to make sure that all the rubber is off of that.
Make sure you get the little O-ring out of the fuel mixture screw because there's
Yes.
always one on it, and sometimes it's stuck down in there and it doesn't want to come out, and you forget about it, and you got to make sure you get that out, especially if you're going to dip it, because that thing will disintegrate and plug out the mixture circuit.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
This is another dipping style that I use quite often.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
I think all of us here do at least. And it's one of those things that I was very skeptical.
Keep this one.
No, it's already it's out there, and
You can
it's
just
not
look
it's
it
not
up.
a secret.
I don't think it's
I said sacred.
send
Oh.
us
Hey, we're about to give you
$20.
guys privilege.
Send us an envelope with a return envelope and
Yeah.
$20, and we'll mail you back this secret.
But this one is, you might have heard of it before, is Pine Sol. This
and
is
Simple Green. I've used Simple Green. It works.
I'm
pretty
a
well,
little.
too.
I haven't
used
tried
both,
it.
and
I haven't.
I think Pine Sol works better.
Really?
The thing with
I've
Simple
never used
Green,
Pine Sol before.
Simple Green can blacken
It does.
aluminum.
It always does.
So
but it,
I would stick away from anything aluminum. I would keep Simple Green away from it. But Pine Sol, this is.
does that not discolor it at all? Pine
No.
Sol?
No, the
And
only
it
thing
leaves
is.
you smelling piney fresh.
Yeah, but another thing, this stuff will dry out your hands pretty quickly, so
Yeah.
I definitely wear gloves for it.
It's safe for rubber,
It's safe for rubber.
but don't put your brass in there because it'll leave a film.
Yeah, it tends to leave like a
I mean, you
blackish
can.
film. It's fine, just blow it out and make
And
sure
yeah,
it's.
you gotta clean it off. But
But also, if you dilute it with water, which I generally do a lot too, just because I buy like a gallon of Pine Sol, and then the dish that I'm using to soak it in won't cover all the surface, so I'll dilute it with water, and that does have a tendency to remove some of that black or that film kind of that it leaves on brass.
Wait, so do you recommend diluting it or not?
I recommend diluting it. It's not going to slow the process down.
you don't have to.
You don't
but
have to.
You can.
See, the last, now that I think about it, because I've always used, like I said, I've always used Simple Green, and I buy the concentrate stuff, and I noticed the last carbs I did, I'm trying to remember what it was off of. Oh, that Moto Guzzi that I had, gnarly carburetors. They were varnished
It's Italian,
solid.
of course.
And I soaked both of those in concentrated Simple Green, like the no water at all, and neither one of those. Maybe it's just they must have been made out of something different because neither one discolored at all.
Yeah.
And I left them soaking for 2 days, and they were like spotless when I took them out.
Well, it may just be. I don't know this for sure. I just always keep Simple Green away from aluminum.
Well, then I know I did it on a
It could
GSXR
be-
a while back.
Mhm.
4 carbs off of a GSXR. they were black. So like I've seen it, but then I also did it. They must have been. I can't imagine they weren't aluminum, but they must have been made out of something else because there's no discoloration.
I think it does differ between cast aluminum and machined aluminum.
Right.
But hey, there's a cheap way to black anodize some cars.
Yeah, they're looking for that custom look.
Yeah.
Well, it's the GSXR. I had polished the frame and and had an extended swing arm, and I needed black anodized carbon.
So you were in Florida.
In Bike Week. Bike Week, Florida.
But you couldn't pay me to write.
Yeah, Pine Sol, it blew me away, and it still surprises me. That stuff definitely does the job, and it's relatively very safe for your carburetors.
How long would you recommend soaking it for if you're doing that?
Do you know what? It depends on how badly the carbs are. I've gotten
left
away
them for like a day.
Yeah.
Well, after about a day or a day and a half, it starts
to lose it. The active ingredient starts to become not active.
Yeah, I'd say 24 hours rule of thumb.
To be honest with you, I've done carbs that weren't severely bad that in 4 hours it was the grime and everything was coming right off of it.
The key is finding a bucket that's like wide enough to fit your carbs in, but it's also not so wide that you're going to pour a gallon of Pine Sol in there, and it's not going to cover the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever you can find that
you guys are looking at this
in,
like doing a rack of 4 carbs, I guess.
That's what I primarily do.
I know. I realize like I keep saying other stuff, but I'm usually working on other stuff that you guys are.
I mean,
so
it's
that
like,
makes sense.
It's 2 or 4 carbs for us most of the time.
That's
we don't really take them off the rack unless we have to like Frankenstein carb racks together.
Yeah.
Right.
And I generally. I mean, if you're comfortable with it and confident you are going to be able to assemble them on the rack again, I go through, if I want the carbs to look pretty, I will completely disassemble them off the rack and soak them, and then after that I'll do my polish and kind of finish on them. So if you are confident in doing that or tackling that project, this makes it a lot easier to soak the carbs because you have more room to play with. And you can kind of Tetris it a little bit.
I would think that's probably out of the scope of somebody listening to this, because if they do disassemble them, it's going to be a bitch getting them back together.
Don't yell at me.
I've made that mistake before. Yeah. It was hard.
That's
what I vowed, never to do carburetors on a CV750 again, ever. I had such a miserable time.
Yeah. And if you are doing Pine Sol, you definitely want to get the Pine Sol off. And hot water. I use hot water. You can do it with lukewarm cold water, but I use hot water because it essentially
cleans everything.
Yeah, it just helps break it up even more.
You'll be amazed at how much cleaner they look.
Yeah, and very badly varnished carburetors. In a couple hours, I'll jump up in the float bowls and kind of agitate it a little bit to help break it up and increase the surface area. It can start breaking it down. And then after that, you want to. This is where compressed air, I would say, is required because you want to go through all of the ports and everything after you dip to blow through. If you're doing the Pine Sol, the Chem Dip stuff will evaporate and dissipate. And so you want to make sure you're getting all of the water and Pine Sol off of the carbs, including the carb bodies as well. Reassemble, just kind of
the opposite of how you
of the scramble we just mentioned.
If you did your homework and paid attention to how everything came apart, I mean, most of the stuff is really only going to go in one spot, so you shouldn't have too much trouble, but I would recommend, if it's your first time, take pictures as you do it of each step. Before you take anything out, take a picture of it so you know exactly where it came from and what it looked like when it was installed.
Yeah.
And that'll give you an easy reference.
And your Facebook and Instagram friends will think you're cool when you post it.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're doing it after listening to this, send us a picture.
Yeah, so we want to see what you guys are working on.
I think it would be badass to see some pictures of stuff that people are working on because they listen to
We're just going to get like black carb pictures and carbs with main jets and pilot jet holes. And
I took Evan's advice on my carburetors are black. you guys have a warranty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Well,
yeah, and if there still is some, like at least on the car bodies themselves on the outside, you can use like a wire brush, or not a wire, like I usually use like the nylon to break up some of the dirt or stuff that's on it, and then for more stubborn areas, like a brass wire brush.
Yep.
I wouldn't go stainless; it's a little too coarse and could start scarring.
Yeah.
To finish, I usually just use some like mag and aluminum.
polish.
I'm a Mother's guy.
Yeah,
mag and
I'm a
aluminum
Mother's
polish.
guy too.
And with like a Scotch-Brite pad.
Yeah, Scotch-Brite pads are just good.
That's
in
one of the
general.
greatest universal, I would say, surface prepping. Finish-wise, you can get some really good finishes, like a brush finish, or even with a combination with the polish, you can get like some polished looks as well, or kind of like a satin polish, which I generally use. There's a lot of different grades and coarseness of them, so if you want to get the shiny finish, that's the wire, or not wire, but the little buffer wheel and crap like that.
Yeah, you don't need that.
Yeah.
Especially your bike probably looks like crap right now anyway. So,
Yeah.
but one other thing that I want
We
to
can
throw
go.
in there.
We can probably do a podcast on finishes.
Yeah.
We'll tie it in
That
somewhere.
would be good. I mean, at this point, you're probably way more concerned with getting
Yeah.
it running than you are with giving
Yeah,
a shit about anything
definitely.
being shiny.
One other thing I want to throw in there too. After you soak it and you get your cars back together, or you're assembling them, you might notice like a white, like dotty kind of.
That's
like,
right.
It's almost like a film, but it doesn't feel like
It's
a
like
film.
an oxidation.
Yeah, it's like an oxidation. Don't worry about it. It's not going to affect like your performance or whatever.
No.
It's clean. It just has this white kind of like
Yeah, and you can generally go
cover
with the
to it.
shop rag with some
or
cleaner
like
and get it off.
a Scotch-Brite pad again.
Yeah.
That'll just rub it on there and it'll just take it right off. But it's not necessary to take it off. You might be scrubbing a little bit, but you shouldn't be worried about that. Like you'll see that when you're done and it's clean. Don't worry. It's all good.
Yeah. So I think that about covers it. Hopefully we didn't confuse you more than inform you on the task of it. Honestly, if you finish this entire podcast, you would have already completed the entire task.
Yeah.
So it does. It's even on a rack of 4. It is not a very time consuming thing.
No.
And have fun with it. Listen to some dumb music or listen to us.
Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah,
it's all good.
Do it in an hour and learn. Once you do your first run, you'll probably be a hell of a lot more confident than you were when you started.
Yeah.
It's like one of the easiest tasks that you can do, and it just is like so like.
And it's
It builds
immediate
confidence, too.
results
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
You throw those back on, and you are going to see a dramatic difference
In how your bike is
depending on
performing.
how bad it was. But you should definitely feel a difference in the running of your motor.
Your bike will actually idle.
Yeah.
Oh, and when you're putting one thing I didn't say, when you remove the fuel mixture screw, which is usually on the bottom, it's always a good idea to screw it back in and count the number of turns.
What bikes are you talking about?
Yeah. Generally,
They're always on the side.
They're always on the bottom.
Fuel mixture screws are-
they're all over the place.
they're
You just
generally in
messed
the
with
center
some
on the
that were on the top. So I mean,
yeah.
it's
Mostly, I've seen them on the sides. On my Harley, it's on the bottom, but
Yeah, almost
Yeah.
everything I've worked on is right in the center on
I've
the
seen
bottom.
them all over the place.
But anyways, count the number of turns when you screw it back in, and then you know what the original setting was.
Don't always
But-
trust
yeah,
that,
because
though,
somebody
'cause
could have turned it
yeah.
way out.
No,
and
it's
way
not
in.
necessarily right, but also if you're trying to troubleshoot it, it's
Put it
good
back
to
where it
know,
was.
It's good to know where it was when it started.
Generally, stock
But-
positions where I usually
1.5.
go, which is usually 1.5 to 2 turns out. When you fully seat the air fuel mixture screw, seat it till it starts to resist a little bit.
Yeah,
Do
like
not
lightly.
tighten that
Yeah,
down.
don't-
Lightly seated is what
That
we're
you
looking
can
for.
easily damage the carbs and get the little bezel in, snap off, and you are done. Cinch it in and then back it out, say 1.5 to 2 turns out, or flush on the housing around it is generally stock position. If you're not sure, do this or just check up and see where the stock position is.
It'll
always
say in
go
your
with
manual, too,
because if you're trying to get the bike running,
Yeah,
richer is
it's
better.
So I've always done 2.5 is because it just to get the bike going again. You're never going to be like in a worse position if you richen it a little bit. So, but either way, if you forgot, I mentioned this at the last. So if you already removed it and you didn't count it, doesn't matter. Just go to 2.
Yeah, 2 turns.
just
I'd say 2 turns because
That's fine.
now that I think about it, it's like 1.5 to 2.5 is like
and
your
chances
max
are you're
limit, so-
excited to get it back on,
Yeah.
do it. So you're not putting the airbox on all the way, or
Well, and depending on how tightly you seated the screw, like 2 could be 2.5. It's like
Yeah,
you don't
exactly.
really know. It's just wherever it ends up. But
um,
anyways, yeah, I think that probably covers it. I hope this helps, and give us some feedback on it. If you use this and it actually
If it
helped
works
you
for
figure it
you.
out, let us know.
yeah, we want to know if we're actually helping.
or if we're just nuisances.
Yeah.
Give us some feedback, some advice. Check out the website at motorbikemondays.com. Send us an email, contact@motorbikemondays.com. I'd be interested to know if you're listening to this on the website or iTunes. Shoot us an email, say hi. Maybe we'll make a Facebook page or something too, so people can post on there. And then we'll be back next week with another topic and talk about more motorcycles.
Sayonara.
See ya.
Yep.